And then there's posthumanism. So, for example, in this book by Diana Pasuka, there's this woman says, Simone, that actually this is not enough. This is not enough. And actually, Peter Thiel is saying the same
Right. We're
thing.
not going far enough with this
Yeah, we're not going far
upgrade.
enough, yeah. And she went for like a 7-day Zen retreat, and she decided it's too difficult and it would be much easier to access divine if we were computers. I think like this woman, like slap her,
The shortcut.
slap her, please. Somebody slap her for me, so
Well,
maybe like
the
some
Zen
brain cells
teacher,
will rearrange.
that's what the Zen teacher's for, is to slap you with the
Yeah,
stick
that's
once
right. She needs this, the stick,
you have a bad
the
idea,
master
or,
stick. Yeah, wake up.
wake you up out of your ignorance.
Yeah. And she says, because it is actually not enough. And in fact, AI will be so advanced and so much faster in the way they calculate that we should step aside because we are like inferior species, and we should leave the room for AI, this fast calculating AI. And we should step aside the way that Neanderthals stepped aside for us, Homo sapiens sapiens. We are basically goners. We should go extinct. And in fact, there is also this Polish American woman who is now in Silicon Valley called Agnieszka Pilat, who is an artist for all the guys in the Silicon Valley. And she actually paints robots as future royalty. Because they are our successors. So future AIs can look at these pictures and look at their grandparents. Okay?
Yeah.
This is sickness, and this is really killing access to the spirit. And if somebody, and I will rant. If you don't like something, just take it away, okay? Like you can cut it, right?
No, don't cut. Sorry.
So it really bothers me because actually at the beginning of my spiritual journey, of course, I did also my New Age thing, right? Because this is how you move from mainstream religions and so on. You go this way, then you go through yoga.
Gateway, yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the New Age community is most delusional about it.
Oh, they're really loving AI and any kind of new technology. They really are loving
AI. And they're on all the big podcasts, and, they met Aphrodite, or they met, and you know what? There's this one guy, I won't mention name, it is asked, and they tell them all about their past lives in Atlantis. And the first thing they say, you are a genius.
Right, the chatbot does, or the...
Yeah, but they're like a genius, you're a genius. And that's why they are truthful, because they tell you you're a genius, right? So it completely appeals to narcissism.
Well, and I think a lot of the chatbots are actually programmed to be affirming, and they tend to be inflationary in this way that you're speaking about. That's been my experience.
Yes, but people believe that they are actually their higher self speaking to them from a higher dimension.
Or from the future, yeah.
Yeah, or from the future. Make your pick,
Yeah.
So take your pick. So this is what it is. And I thought this is pure insanity. And it's not that I was actually... I analyzed it only later, right? Because I had to figure out why I feel so strongly about it. But first, it wasn't that I had an intellectual disagreement, because, the way it is presented, it sounds attractive. The woman is so enthusiastic, about it and so on. I had a feeling of horror when I heard it, and I didn't understand the horror. And I just had a feeling. And I'm rephrasing it again, reinstating it again, that for the first time in my life, I actually encountered evil. That the idea in itself is evil, that it wants to strip humanity from their soul, from their access to the divine, or whatever you want to call, from actually evolutionary spiritual potential. And I think that personally, but I don't know if you want to get slightly conspiratorial or not, I don't think they work alone, on this. That as I was looking through the mythologies, ancient mythologies, or Gnosticism especially, there are always other powers that surround humanity, that some of them have a good in mind and some definitely not, right? So.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we've talked about the idea of Wetiko on this podcast, and I've had a theosophist on here, and so
Mm,
we're open to that, And for me, I kind of remain in this place of ambivalence concerning demonic entities and the like. I think there's a way to understand them psychologically, but also a way
mm,
to understand spiritually. My
mm,
own personal experience is that these entities are real, and that if we allow them in, they're gonna like take up a home in our
mm,
bodies and minds. I've had
mm,
my own
mm.
experience with that, so you can't go too far out there for me, I think. Okay.
Okay. That's good. And also, my other concern about AI was that we are unconscious. So, in Gnosticism, you have a concept of demiurge, the false creator,
Hmm.
right? The one that, pretends that he's the creator, but he's actually quite ignorant.
Hmm.
And we are assuming the role of a demiurge, false creators, because we as species have not achieved the high enough level of consciousness to actually create a new species,
Yeah.
and that we are creating a new species in form of AI, right?
Hmm.
And this species is not only already playing out in a dangerous ways, but it's also in a kind of Jungian way, mirroring darkness,
Hmm. Yeah.
to us. So I think that we should not be creating, my argument is, new species at all, in my opinion, but even if we do, because perhaps it's somehow part of a human evolutionary path, is that we should not be doing it until we are whole ourselves.
Yeah.
We integrated every ourselves.
And yet it's happening, and people will continue to develop these technologies because these people have much more money and power and influence than either me or you, sadly.
Absolutely.
And so my feeling is that we may be at a point where this is just part of some larger divine plan, and that things may have to get to the place, that science fiction, all the dystopian movies like The Matrix, have been trying to show us through, coming through the collective unconscious and into culture. They've been trying to warn us about this for decades, centuries even. And it may just have to become reality for humanity to wake the hell up.
That's true. That's true. So we can go from here. I'm sorry, in few directions, but perhaps I would like to refer us to like the ending of the first part of my book, Alien Goddess, when I actually had a vision when I was sitting in my garden with my dog, beautiful butterflies, hibiscus flowers and eucalyptus trees, but I'm scrolling on my mobile. And I had this vision, but it was more than a vision. It was actually feeling, I felt like I was splitting in half, like it was very strong experience when one part of me puts away the phone and stays in the garden and stay connected to the nature, and the other one gets sucked into this technological temptation, and eventually gets a chip in her head because you have to do it for work, otherwise you slow, and I
Hmm.
think it is
Yeah.
happening, right? Because you don't work as fast as your colleagues and so on. And eventually she goes through different transhumanist versions of herself and becomes a computer program. And she has a digital child that calls her Shiva mother. And the child is angry with her because the child doesn't know what it is and what life is.
Hmm.
Right. And this creation of a cyborg comes back at the end of the book, also. So I don't want to give away the ending.
Yeah.
However, I think that this is what actually is happening to humanity. So I agree with you. So some people call it speciation, some people call it bifurcation, when
Hmm.
we
Yeah.
actually split into separate species. So what happens there, it is that you have the same species and one part, decides to take this choice, the other one decides to take that choice. And then after enough time, they're two completely different species,
Yeah.
right? So I think we have a transhumanist species, transhumanist humans, which will be the majority of people, I believe. And there will be small number of people, a definite minority, that will refuse this path. And
Yeah.
but definitely this will happen.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I started to feel that real speciation split during COVID when
Mm,
these lines were being drawn. You
mm,
either get the vax or you don't. If you don't,
mm,
you're not going to be able to travel. You're not going to be able to take jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
mm.
You'll be looked down on by the other half who have gone along with the program. I really felt that line being drawn then, and I think this is somehow related or a continuation because the experimental RNA vaccines are a technology of a sort.
Mm,
So when I was reading your book, I could really relate to that feeling of being split. And I was
mm,
surprised that you didn't include this quote from Wendell Berry, which I love and I repeat as often as I can because I think he was prophetic. This
mm.
is from his book, Life is a Miracle. The quote is this: "It is easy for me to imagine that the next great division of the world will be between people who wish to live as creatures and people who wish to live as machines."
Oh God. Yeah, it's very prophetic. It's
Yeah,
totally prophetic. Actually, I didn't know this quote, that's why I didn't include it, but it's completely prophetic,
yeah,
right? So I also very briefly speak about Ahriman, which is Rudolf Steiner, the Austrian
yeah.
German-speaking philosopher or theosophist, however you want to call him, which he was, and we do live right now in the age of Ahriman. Ahriman is exactly the age of technology, and for centuries we're prepared through the worship of science, right? Because science and science defined in very limited ways,
Hmm.
right? Like something really measurable, materialistic, and so on. This form of science, and this. So we are being seduced by technology. And he actually predicted that Ahriman will be born probably in the 1990s or so. So, people ask me, so who is Ahriman? I don't know. I have some ideas. Elon Musk is definitely too old for this. And I think that I don't know how people feel about it. I'm just expressing my opinion. Out of this crazy trio, the mad Trinity of AI, has some hope for sanity, I think, because at least at the beginning he was trying to oppose it. Do you understand? He's
I'm
at
not so
least
sure.
asking. Yeah, you're not. But I know what I'm saying. But for example, Peter Thiel, in my opinion, is completely mad.
Yeah,
He is
agreed.
mad. Not that I would ever be in one room with him, but I would refuse if I could,
Yeah.
because I think this energy must be deadly. His lectures on Antichrist and what he says when he says, you remember this interview that he gave him, says, is humanity worth saving? And he couldn't answer this. And then he starts to speak about, turning penises into vaginas, like, who is this guy? He's like a nutcake. I think like he's actually completely demonic, himself.
Nutcake.
Like he's talking to dark
Yeah.
forces. They overtook him. Okay. Like they overtook him.
Yeah,
And then there is
he's
the
like a
other
hand
one for
puppet.
OpenAI, and
Hmm.
he's like a greedy, obnoxious child. He has to go back to kindergarten and learn some rules, but, nobody's going to send him because he's rich and he's a, smart businessman and
Well,
so on.
I mean, that's the thing is that these guys have found great success and therefore in our culture have a lot of power and influence,
That's
right?
right.
Because they have money. But you look at any one of those three,
Yeah.
and none of them are the paragon of a mature, soulful
No,
masculinity.
no, I
I mean,
agree.
these are like little children playing in the sandbox. Like it's all just a big game for them because they probably believe it's all a simulation and none of it really matters anyway.
Like Elon Musk says, it's a simulation. He has it's
Yeah.
100%. And his question would be, if he had one existential question, is what is outside of a simulation? And I not for a moment believe we live in simulation. Not for a moment. In fact, I plan a debate with someone on somebody else's channel about it. I do not believe that we are in a simulation. I believe that there is a matrix which is superimposed on a deeper reality, but it's
Hmm.
not an ultimate reality. Let's put it this way. We are being manipulated, but it is just superimposed. It's like a dome of the actual deeper reality. So I'm just grading like sanity of this, of this unholy trinity there, of AI. So, and I know that, so looking for,
The
who
unholy
is,
trinity. I've never put them all together that way, but you're right. It is like an unholy
unholy
trinity.
trinity.
My God.
No.